She looks happy.
She does.
How do we know when we're on?
I think we're on. Good afternoon and welcome to our New Energy Works talk series. We're glad you could join us today and we appreciate your interest in our wonderful craft, our timber frame craft. We'll be offering this series every other week for the next 5 weeks, so keep an eye open for the information that comes from our stellar marketing department. They'll be alerting you to times and days and topics. Our topic today is custom design. We call it the home within you. Joining me today are 2 key members of our design team. Both of these gentlemen are talented architects with loads of design and timber frame experience. Ty Allen, Ty, can you wave? Ty Allen heads up our design team in the Farmington, New York office, and he happens to be the only person in the office, as you can see by the background. David Shirley, working from home. David Shirley serves a similar role in our Portland, Oregon office. Both of these gentlemen are key to our design team and work with their design staffs to develop wonderful design programs and the homes that you see often displayed on our website. David and I are working remotely, so please excuse our casual surroundings. We're all still observing the stay-at-home orders just a little while longer, and we hope to be back full speed here really soon. I'd like each of my coworkers to say a few words about themselves and talk for a minute maybe about the history of their work. Ty, since your last name starts with A, how about if you take the lead?
Well, first, thanks, Drake, for the intro, and thanks for calling us gentlemen. That was very nice of you. It's good to see you, as always. So I've been with New Energy Works for about 14 years, and I run our design build division. I have enjoyed working with a number of clients all over the country on a variety of projects, and both love the design process, love the process of building, and love the team we get to work with each and every day. And so, yeah, just happy to have an opportunity to share a little bit about what we know.
Wonderful. David?
Thanks, Drake. As Drake said, my name is David Shirley. I've been with New Energy Works now 7 years on their West Coast office. I am the lead architect for our design group. Also enjoy working with our group. We have a little bit of different circumstances often over here. We have different seismic zones to work with, different styles that people seem to gravitate towards, and really enjoy working here and all over the country because of projects in Colorado and further even east sometimes. And
the design team and the number of people that are involved at New Energy Works is the exciting part to me. There isn't a challenge we haven't been able to face. We have lots of talent. We have lots of expertise that spans a great number of years, including our owner and founder, Jonathan Orpin, who started the company back in the early 80s. So we have a lot of talent to draw on. And since we build all over the country, there are times when we have to scratch our heads and try to figure out how to solve problems. This is a great team to be able to do that with. We're going to start the conversation here with the vast majority of our work in-house is custom work. It makes up everything that we do. Why do we do that, and what is it all about, and how do people get involved? Ty?
Yeah, well, we really believe in the custom design process. We think that and feel strongly that the two most important parts of any project are the site, the place, and the people. And really great projects become really great projects because of those 2 things. And so we believe wholeheartedly that you have to understand what the site is. It teaches you how to build. And the land kind of talks to you about what's feasible, what's doable, what's comfortable, what makes sense. But we also want to do our best to capture the best parts of the land, whether it's view or approach or shade or sun or whatever. We also want to grab the best parts of who our clients are, what they foresee as their vision for this project. We really want to draw that out of them. And so those are the two most important and key parts of any project. And that's why we love custom. We feel like there's room for projects that in the world for projects that maybe are pre-designed plans and that sort of thing. It's just something we've chosen not to do because we feel strongly that we can do the best job that we can possibly do by learning from those two things, the place and the people, and bringing those together. David, what do you have to add to that? Anything?
I don't know if I can add much to that. That was fairly succinct and well said, I think. Even I will add maybe that, oftentimes, I've started clients that have no idea other than a square footage number and a good idea of what they don't like, to clients who have brought in a sort of idea, inspiration plan. And like Ty says, we almost always deviate that, even if we pull some inspiration or nugget of truth out of that or inspiration that they brought to us, by the time we're finished, it's a whole project to itself. And that, goes and just proves to us that the custom design process is almost a necessary component for a well-designed home.
Yeah, and the title of this part of this first installment of the series really says it. We know that each of our clients have a house inside of them that they've been carrying around. Maybe it's been 30 years, maybe it's been 3 years, maybe it's been 3 months since they started to think about the home that they'd like to build. So when they come to us, they have varying pasts, they have varying levels of intimacy with the property that they'll build on. They have varying dreams, they have varying visions for how they'll live in the future, and different paths for how in the way that they've lived in the past. And so those things are really important and meaningful to us. And if we can really get to the bottom of who our clients are, if we really get to know them, if we can be really great listeners, we'll start to understand their story. And if we know their story, then we'll know how to help extend that story or write a new story or whatever they're really looking for us to do. And that's as much a part of the vision as I'd like 4 bedrooms and 2 baths or whatever. Those things, they're common to each project, but each individual client has a story to tell, and we like to be part of telling it.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that sort of sums up how we function. We do it a little differently than many other companies, and we strive to draw out from each of our clients the most important features that they're after in their building. We touched a little bit earlier on the word site visit. Tell me about the fact that we do it, why we do it, and what do we gather from that experience?
Sure. David, do you want to lead, or you want me to start this one?
I'll jump in. Ty touched on it, that the land teaches us how to build. And we certainly, we make sure that we have a site visit with every new custom design project, no matter where it is. And the reason and we also almost insist that it occurs alongside the owners, because, with us we gather so much information just by talking to them on the site, just even casual conversation, and things that clients may not even be aware of are as important. We notice and we listen and hear, small pieces of information that we extrapolate later out into the design. And as we're walking through and looking at, we see what views they think are important. We see how they see themselves coming into the site. And we often will agree with that because they've spent some time there. Often we'll challenge that as well, and we'll push them to, we'll advise based on sort of what we see, our expertise, and then, we have a robust discussion about that.
Yeah, and often, most of the time when you walk onto a site with someone for the first time, you get a sense that they understand the place. They get a feel for what's the best, whatever term you'd like to use, energy on the site. And most people understand that instinctively, but there are times when they don't. And there are times where we can come alongside, and we get to come alongside and say, gosh, that's great, but have you thought about over here? Have you thought about, this view versus that view? Sometimes, as an example, you do a site visit and a client might think that one view is the particularly best view. And of course, whatever one they like the best is probably the best. And that's the one you want to grab. But there have been many times where I've been on a site and quickly learned that, okay, you know what, there's other aspects, there's other assets that the site has that we can make something up and we can enhance and we can make better or experience or use the building to engage. In many ways, a building is a lens through which you see things, right? Not only physically in terms of views, but how you see the world or how you experience the world on a daily basis. And that home that you spend time in is so much more than just walls and a roof. It's shelter. And that shelter not only separates you from the land, this beautiful piece of property that you've chosen, but it also helps you reconnect with that piece of property, with that land. And in some ways reconnect with the things that we love the most, being outdoors, fresh air, walking through the grass, beautiful sunset, whatever. Those things are really important, and good buildings take advantage of them. And so we can't fully understand that unless we spend time on that site with you, but also have our own time. There are many, many occasions where I'll be on a site and I'll kind of drift off. You spend a few hours out there and I'll drift off and I'll just start to think and start to imagine a little bit. And so that's important too. So we want to experience your site with you, just as David said, because there's no way to replicate that. The physical, being there physically, you can't replicate with Google, you can't replicate with photos or videos. You can use those as really good tools and references, which we do on every project, but you have to be there to experience it for yourself.
What's interesting about sites, in my experience, is that some of them are quite modest in size. They might be a half acre or an acre, or it might be a city lot that we're trying to build on. Maybe the options aren't as vast in some of those smaller locations. Some of them are hundreds of acres. I've discussed this with people at my shows who have 200 acres in Tennessee. The challenges are so different, and the grades are different, and the views are different. With 200 acres, you might even have different climate in your own site. That site visit is really, really important, and I'm glad that we do it, and I'm proud that we do it. Tell me a little bit more about the process of design. If somebody comes to us and says, okay, let's get started, what are the steps that we go through, and what's the interaction of our staff to that person as that process transpires?
Sure. Well, it all starts with the site visit, as we mentioned. We won't even start a project without a site visit. And so once we've done that, we'll get to the schematic design process, which is really the big decision making about the overall design. And so we'll present an initial schematic design after we've extracted all the information we can possibly get out of you, after we've visited your site. We'll come up with a basic concept. And when I say basic, it's more than maybe what it sounds like. There's a balance. You try to get the major feel and function and the form of the house. You start to delineate that or start to bring that forth, but you don't want to get too far because it's an iterative process. And so while you want to get something established on paper that's meaningful, that you can react to, you try not to get too detailed and too far down the road, because you really want interaction. You want back and forth together as you look at this design, as it unfolds, and you talk about what works, what doesn't. We get feedback and we'll make some changes, and we go through a number of iterations. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. And those different go-arounds, as we often call them, between us and the client, those major kind of discussions and decision-making about the primary parts of the building, they happen really in the first half of the design process. So the first half of the design process is really focused on overall broad design. And then the second half is really focused on the construction drawings, or creating the drawings that you'll build from, that you'll get your permits from, that you'll do pricing with. So it's really a two-half process. The first half is very design intensive. The second half is more detail intensive. The first half is a lot of fun. It's out of all the things I get to do in my job, I really love working through that first half of the design process. It's both a little nerve-wracking because you're trying to do your very best to again capture that that vision that our clients have, is begin to show it back to them, so to speak. So there's a little bit of nervousness in that, but it's exciting and it's fun. But you're really talking about big picture things, about how people will live and how they'll experience space on a daily basis. And there's so much in the process and so much in the reality of buildings that we're in every day that you don't even think about, how you use things, how many steps you take when you're in the kitchen from one place to another, how you experience light at different times in the day. All these things that, unless we really focus on them and really talk about them and try to bring them out, you sort of gloss over them. And that's another reason why we really love the design process and the process of custom design, is that you get to dig in there, you get to find out who people are, you get to find out what makes them tick and how they'll live each day. And then the building gets to reflect that. And I think that's a lot of fun. So it's an iterative process. It's an intensive process. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a lot of fun. And I think in some ways, maybe I'm biased, but it's the most fun part of the process. What do you say, David?
I agree. For me, it's certainly the most fun. Curating, digesting and interpreting what these clients' needs are into a physical building and giving life to it is something both that I enjoy, and frankly, almost all of my clients, they love this part of the process too. For many of the clients, it's either their first home that they're custom design building, or it's their forever home. Sometimes both, oftentimes both. And they've been waiting for this moment their whole life, or 3 months or 3 years, what have you. But one of the things I like about my job is my clients are happy to be working with me. I'm not having to force them to think about things. Sometimes we have to impose a little bit of more rigor to our clients who are a little more aloof, but they always enjoy the process. And that's one of my favorite things about the job. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the tools that we actually use during this process, just a little bit. So I'm going to make my attempt at this technology and share some screens. We do a couple of things. We go through a traditional 2D process where we create these drawings, but we also have a 3D modeling that the software we use to create the 2D drawings is actually the same software that creates the 3D model, which is really handy. It's called building information modeling. And so when we're putting walls and floors in these projects, they're not just two-dimensional lines. They actually have information that we can study, and we can look at shadows, we can get square footages. We use this modeling, this Revit program, throughout the entire process. And so we will initially start with some two-dimensional drawings. And these are great. Everybody's used to seeing these. You can look in the internet and find lots of floor plans. I'm not going to dwell too long on these. I'm just going to kind of go through what this is a design development set, what it might look like. There'll be sections and two-dimensional drawings with some 3D axonometrics thrown in. And this is the traditional way architectural drawings are done, and they're quite fine. But I do have a certain number of clients who they're like, gosh, I really need to be there to walk in. So, see this space. I have trouble. I can't think three-dimensionally that well. I'm just not used to it, which makes sense because, most people don't spend their time looking at two-dimensional drawings and trying to interpret it, what that means in three-dimensional space. And then, perspectives can help. And these are actually images from a model that we have created. And so these help. However, that said, we also would like to, we try to bring another level of this into, and in these early stages, in the schematic stages, as Ty was saying, we'll develop these 2D drawings, but we also have this capacity to show these models, and we leave it here. We're showing it in white so that, as Ty was saying, people can focus in on the general ideas, the space, the volumes, how these relationships relate. How much light are you going to get in with this sort of window arrangement? The big picture is what we're trying to go through in this stage. I'm going to cut this. I'm not going to let this run through. What we do for our clients is we can prepare these videos, and when we present, we leave them with these, and actually they can interact with them and drive around and really take a deep dive, which really helps our clients. For a lot of our clients, this really makes a difference, and this is their aha moment.
Yeah, David, in a lot of ways, I haven't seen people's eyes light up like I have when they get a chance to move around inside these models, because it really does, as you say, it brings it to life for them. It gives them, people can understand three-dimensional space really well, as you mentioned, much more so than they can understand two-dimensional drawings. And so, for me, one of the really fun things and one of the joys of the process is watching people see their house for the first time and actually be inside of it for maybe the first time. And as it evolves and as the design evolves, it's fun to use this model as a decision-making tool. And often we're trying some things out. In the old days, so to speak, we would always say, "Oh gosh, don't draw anything in front of the clients because you really want a chance to think about them." And that may be partially true, but one of the things that I've seen change over the years is because people like David and the other team members are so good at this software, which I am not. They can take and make some changes on the fly. We can talk about some things. We can show you this or show you that. And while you don't do that with every single detail, there are some broader decisions that can be made in a way using this modeling technique that in the past we weren't able to do. And so we can start to ferret out some of the things that don't work so well and some of the things that need some development. So, and then internally we get to also use this tool behind the scenes to help us design and make decisions. So that's one of the really interesting benefits that I had never thought of, which is it's not only for the clients, it's for us to help.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I spend a lot of time just walking around these models myself, making changes because you just get to look at every corner, every aspect of these projects. And with a two-dimensional drawing, you just don't have that opportunity. And this end right here is another thing I really like. It really starts to engage lighting in a much more functional way than we can. Screen share, excuse me.
One of the so early on, the software that David's showing is called Enscape. Early on, when we started to use the software, I went over to one of my coworkers, Kyle, one day, and I looked over his shoulder, and I said, "You're just over here playing video games all day long, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yep." And I said, "Well, that means you should start paying us to work here since you're having so much fun." So he laughed and then went back to his video games. But it's a fun tool. It's a great tool, and it works really well. So thanks for sharing that, David.
I think those combination is just a really, with the 2N to 3D, that really, it just creates a robust design package that, almost anybody can wrap their brain around.
And one of the things to clarify while we're talking about it is that David sort of showed those 2D drawings, right? That those are actually construction drawings. Those represent the final, more working drawings that you'll see at the end of the process. On the front end of the process, it's a lot more pretty pictures, so to speak, and there's a lot. It's heavy. The presentations are heavier on the three-dimensional side of things. And what I was starting to say before, and I think I diverted from it, was that early on in the process, we are representing the drawing, the design in a fairly detailed way by using the modeling technique. But we have to be very balanced about it. And David mentioned it too. You start with a white model. You're trying to confuse things with color because someone might not like a teal house. They might like a green house or something like that. So you're trying not to confuse issues like color with big decisions like, do you even, does it feel good in this space to you, in your great room space? Or do you like the way that the living spaces relate or whatever? And the model helps us do that without getting too off track and trying to make decisions before we're ready to.
I wanted to show you that white model that I showed you just real quickly. These are drawings that would be more of a schematic nature that we would show, that are much more loose. They're talking about concepts. There's not dimensions on them. They're relative. They are dimension and scalable, but they are not drawn out because the idea is about these relationships, the proportioning. It's a loose idea because we don't want people to get locked into, oh gosh, I don't like this siding here, or I don't like the closet door being a double door, or something like that. So as Ty was saying, this is more of what you would expect, sort of a part of what you would expect early on.
Yeah, this design process is very much about learning about you, our clients, and decision making, but it's also about knowing what decisions need to be made when, and we sort of alluded to it before, and that's really important, that you're focused on the things you need to be focused on that makes sense for the time and the process that you're at. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Since you're in New York, Ty, and David, you're in Portland, Oregon, and a client is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, wanting to build a house, how do you communicate the tools that you're showing? How do you communicate those back and forth? And what's the typical frequency of being in touch with your client?
Yeah, great question. I'll maybe start this one, David, and let you come in. Well, we've all experienced a huge change here the last couple months, right? So for most of our clients, or many of our clients, they didn't know what Zoom was before this pandemic, but now they do. And maybe that's a nice, one small silver lining for us in our day-to-day, that more people will be engaged with the technology. We've used Zoom for years because we do have clients that are hours and hours away at sometimes. So one of the things that we like to do is, number one, we make the site visit in person, which is really important. I'll be showing up at your site personally, or David on the West Coast. And then when we have our first meeting to review the first schematic design, we'd like to do that in person if at all possible, because there's no way like being together to understand, to get a kind of an intangible sense of if they're enjoying the design, if they're connecting with it, if it's going well, right? It's nice to be across the table from one another. And then beyond that, often we'll say, we can do a lot over Zoom. And so we'll use the technology to its fullest, and we can share screen just like David did a minute ago, and we can bring you through in much the same way we would if you were sitting next to us. So we're pretty adept at working remotely, and we're all a little bit better at it now. And so it works out pretty well. I don't know if that fully answers it. Go ahead, Dave.
I feel like I work, because the West is so vast, I often have clients who are pretty geographically distant from Portland. And like Ty said, we try to at least get them up for the first schematic design round, because that, even if we don't get it, sometimes what we learn by our misses on that first round can teach us so much. And like Ty says, body language, just the free flow of discussion without the sometimes difficulty of technology is a really nice thing to have, all things being equal. That said, go ahead.
Yeah. So to your point, you're not only visiting the site and maybe their kitchen table and spending some time with the client, but you're also inviting them to our Portland facility and our New York facility, which I stress all the time. The experiences to come to our facilities and meet our people and see our work and smell the sawdust, that's incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And they come, we do the whole, we bring them to our studio and we have the meeting. We try to go to the shop and, the sawdust tour, as we call it. And we even have a show home that's actually the owner's home, personal home, that we will, we really like to give people a sense of that. Oftentimes that's, sometimes that's before they're even officially a client. They'll come out and do that whole tour and kind of feel us out. But if they haven't had that opportunity, we certainly try to encourage them to do that during the process.
Mm-hmm.
I have a client who was way down in Atlanta, and I actually, it sort of varies. It was a client that wanted several site visits, and we were able to arrange that. As a custom design build company, we have our standards, but we also are very flexible, and we can deal with the needs of individuals if you have a more challenging site, or if you just really value that face time and you want to fly in, or if you need to have just a lot of Zoom meetings, we can, I try to have a standing just check-in once a week, just to say, hey, hope you guys are well, not anything to report necessarily, but just a way to make sure we're always engaging with our clients so that they don't feel like we've run off, oh, my architect ran off, or running off to do some other things. So anyway, we just, communication. I guess that's the key.
All right. So I hear this as I travel around the country and do my trade shows and so forth, that folks are a little bit scared of the design process. Perhaps they've never been through it before. It sounds daunting. It sounds lengthy. It sounds like they have to provide every little detail, and they're frightened to get involved in it. And sometimes that's why they go to a simpler method on the internet, for example, and perhaps get a house that doesn't suit them quite as well. How do you overcome their fears?
That's a great question. You know, we mentioned earlier that some people have been thinking about their project for a long time. We've had people come to us with like 4 volumes that are this thick of things they've torn out of magazines and, you know, clippings and these types of things, or people use Houzz, or people use Pinterest, and they've compiled all this information. And some people come to us, and I think David mentioned it before, and they'll say, gosh, I don't really know anything. I got a piece of property and I know I want this many bedrooms, this many baths, and here's one picture that I found that I like. And so no matter how much information a client has, if they've got a ton or they've got very little, that's okay. And whatever people are comfortable with, we're comfortable with. And in the end, our job is to know what questions to ask and be really good listeners. And if we're doing those 2 things, then listening leads to more questions and a dialogue. And we're really just trying to have a conversation throughout the process and unearth as much as we possibly can. So I would say to people that they shouldn't be nervous that they have to have it all figured out, or shouldn't you know, be concerned that they have to have an abundance of information. If they know the basics and can tell us, you know, those things, we can get the rest out of you. You know, we kind of know how to do that and enjoy doing that, honestly.
Yes. We want to get to some questions and provide some answers here momentarily. There's 2 tools that I think folks can do at home that I think helps the mental process, helps flush out some new ideas, and then eventually you share with us. The first is, on our website, we have a design questionnaire. It's a PDF, you download it, you print it out. For the multiple people in the household, it's not a bad idea for everybody to read through the questions and answer them, and then compare some notes and see what the challenges might be in the features that are important. Obviously, you then share that with us, and that's good information. It's written down, and it's good information to study. The second thing is, I encourage everybody to build their library. Photos, magazine articles, possible floor plans, the timber frame design that they get excited about, some of the interior features, the front door, the fireplace, the kitchen cabinets. All of that information gets dumped out on the design person's desk, and that all transcends into that design at some point. You know, it's an interesting summary of all of these details at some point. And so the more that we know, the more the homework that you can do at home, and that's the fun part, as I see it. And it's a valuable contribution to the process.
Yeah, we want our clients to feel like they're participants in the whole process. And you know, I was talking with someone the other day. One of the greatest compliments, or if you want to call it that, or one of the best things that we can hear from a client is at the end of their process, when they talk about the design as though it was theirs, because it is theirs. It's whatever they had in mind, whatever they had in their heart, whatever they wanted to capture as part of their vision. If we can do that, and we do a good job drawing it out of them and presenting that house back to them, and giving them something that they love and want to spend, you know, maybe 30 years in, or the rest of their life. And then when they take hold of it and they claim it as their own, to us, that's a really great thing. And that's how it should be.
Yes. So for those of you who are listening in, there is an opportunity to type in a question. I think you have to go to the bottom of your screen where the question and answer little icon is. You're welcome to type those in and we'll try to answer them as best we can, as many as we can. And if we don't get to your question, please don't hesitate to contact us through our website or give us a phone call. We're glad to help. We do have the first question. The question is, if somebody comes to us already with a plan, or maybe they've already started and engaged with a designer, they might not be getting what they want. They might not be happy with the relationship. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's a case-by-case situation. Certainly, we've had lots of projects that have come to us, and they're in some various state of completion. The West Coast has had a number of projects where the schematic design or the concept has been developed, and they've taken that and sort of run with it. And so there are lots of reasons why someone might come to us with a plan or with a partially completed process. I think the important thing is that we understand how they got to where they're at, and understand what on paper that they already have established is meaningful to them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. If they're asking us to kind of take the design and finish it or run with it or whatever, we'll try to understand both what's been produced up to that point and what our clients like about it, don't like about it, and what the best way that we can help them is. So that's one way that we'll kind of come into a process. And then sometimes some people come to us, or every day people come to us, and they've got an outside designer, and we work with those in that capacity all the time, where they have an outside designer. Maybe we're just producing the timber frame, or working on the timber frame portion, or the timber frame and enclosure part of the project. We work with them to help design the timber frame in that case, maybe solely, but we're often working with outside architects and designers if they have one established already. If they don't, people come to us because they like, they tell us that they like the fact that we have some design capability in-house, and that's the capacity that David and I work in every day.
One of the interesting transitions that folks have to make, when I travel around the country and do the trade shows, there's 10 to 12 of those each year between September and May. Folks will come and we'll do a seminar. They'll see all the pretty pictures. They see our competitors. They get excited about the timber frame, because that's mostly what we're talking about in those venues. What's interesting is when you folks start the process with them, you're talking about the building. And the timber frame really becomes a secondary piece that's added to it as it develops. We understand that. But it's an interesting transition. They have to switch gears of what has gotten them excited at one point, and now thinking about, oh, the full building, the site, how it lives, where's the garage, how do we get in through the pantry to the kitchen, and so forth. It's an interesting challenge for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. David, do you have any other comments here? We're starting to field a few questions here, and I've got to read through them briefly for a second.
Yeah, sure. I will, while you're reading the questions, it's been an interesting observation of my time here on the West Coast that we get a certain number of architectural refugees, which as an architect, I consider disparage architects a little bit, right? Oftentimes we can get on our high horse about we really feel design with a capital, architecture with a capital A. What's really interesting, what I like about where this company is that we're builders at heart too. So everything is approached from both, yes, a high architecture with a big design goal, but also from a practical building standpoint. We can't help but look at this thing as, how are we going to put this thing together? And I think, two things we do really well is listen. And we are also very, in some ways, we always come about it from we view one of our lenses as through a builder lens. And so, I think that's one of our secrets of success.
Yes. One of the questions that just came up is about the budget for the project, how we zero in on that, contain it so that people are getting the best value and the most features for their money, including the timber frame, because that's, of course, a key essential piece to the finished building. How do we go about examining that at different intervals?
Boy, they cut right to the chase. Started with the hard stuff first, pretty much. Well, the budget's one of the most challenging parts of a project. If we all had or wanted to spend infinite dollars. In some ways, the process might be easier. In some ways, it might be harder. But everyone comes with a budget of some sort, and that budget might be more or less flexible. And so what we ask for is transparency. We have no vested interest as a company to not designing to their budget if it's possible. Now, sometimes what we have to do is work really hard to marry expectation, which might be at one end of the spectrum, and desired dollars to spend at a different part of the spectrum. And our job in a lot of ways is kind of hammering those things out together to find a place that's comfortable. And so what that might mean is the house has to get a little smaller if the budget's not where it needs to be. It might mean there's decisions that need to be made along the line to have a house that's less complex, or doesn't have as much volume, roof volume, or whatever. There's a multitude of things you have to work through. But the first thing we ask for is transparency. And so tell us what your budget is. And as Drake mentions, when we feel a responsibility for the entire budget, not just the timber frame piece or the enclosure piece that we might be producing. On the East Coast, we do a fair amount of general contracts. So in those projects that I'm very involved in, we're responsible for the entire budget. But as your designers, we need to understand what the budget is, and we need to help you make decisions, or we need to sometimes just say, hey, this isn't going to work. Something has to give here. But I think our goal at the end of the day is try to get our clients as much as we possibly can for the dollars they're willing to spend, and design to the place that they want us to design to. And that's not it's not an easy process. So we have checks on the East Coast. We have checks along the way. We do some conceptual budgeting, and then we do some more fine line item budgeting if we're the general contractor as the project evolves.
Good. I think that's a good explanation of it. I often get asked, what do timber frames cost? And I always have to clarify that in our conversations, that we can talk about the timber frame as an entity, as a single piece. We also need to talk about the full budget and the whole house and the site work and so forth, which is what you folks are responsible for. So it's the combination of both that we have to keep in mind. David, any more comments that you can think of at this point?
Oh, I mean, I think Ty summed that up pretty well. It's a challenge, and it's a dance in some ways, of giving them as much as they can and respecting their budget, and sometimes having the hard conversations. And it's a custom process. You're creating something that's never been built before, and the site is often a highly variable item, and it there are a myriad of factors, and it's complicated.
A question just came up about the size of our buildings and how complicated they can be. Folks ask about the square footage and if they're all large or if they're small. The smallest building that I've been involved in one of my projects was 750 square feet. So talk a little bit about size and how we fit timber frame components into those buildings.
Go for it, David.
I've worked on all sizes. I've a couple 8,000 square foot buildings. We have a 1,200 square foot building here close to us in McMinnville that I was going to probably go down as one of my favorite projects, because the challenges of a small site and a small budget are something I relish. And keeping things simple and clean also speaks to sort of the Pacific Northwest style a little bit. But the large projects are often are very exciting as well, and big budgets are fun. But we also we try to make them timber frame be relevant to the house, and how much timber framing goes in often depends on the square footage of the house and the style of the house. We as designers, we want you to get the best overall feel of your house. We want good windows, we want good egress, we want views. We will sacrifice some timber frame to make sure you get the house that you want. We want to include timber frame, that's why you're here, and it's certainly an integral part of our design. But I'm not going to maximize the timber frame at the expense of windows or good bedrooms or things like that. So it's always a balance and a case-by-case basis.
We're building good quality buildings first. That's our responsibility to the clients and to the earth. It's just the right way to do it. A question came up about hybrid. And Ty, maybe you can touch on that. rather than a full timber frame. That's the
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I started at New Energy Works, I feel like it was the beginning of maybe a transition, or the early parts of a transition away from full timber frame homes. We'll do some houses that are full timber frame, but by and large, most of our projects are hybrid in some way, shape, or form. And I think there's a couple of reasons. Many people grab hold of the hybrid idea because they think it's like a miracle to save a bunch of money. And while it can save money, it doesn't always mean it's going to. You know, a classic example is if you had a big rectangle and you're marching along with timber frame bents, and then you get to the last section of the house and you say, you know what, let's save a few bucks. Let's stop the timber frame right here and we'll just stick frame this. Well, there's almost no economic advantage to that, because it'd be easier just to put another bent up and just keep the systems rolling and make it timber frame. So in certain cases where you can separate one part of the house and it can be stick framed, there can be some advantages from a cost perspective, but more so, you know, one of our classic examples that we have as a company is we put enough posts in the corners of showers over the years to not want to do that anymore, and to realize there's not a lot of value to that. It's a headache. So there are oftentimes mudrooms and bathrooms that we can kind of stack them together. That might be a hybrid portion of the house, but hybridizing houses is something we do every day. You know, we've probably got 30 projects on the boards here on the East Coast, and there might only be one or two of those that are full timber frames. So we're pretty accustomed to that.
A question just came up about timber frame elements in a smaller home. And what I often suggest is we're timbering the public area of your house. David, you want to talk about that a little bit? And that's basically the hybrid question.
Yeah, they're sort of related. You know, with a smaller home, you know, will be, you know, hybrid is often the approach. But honestly, that house, that 1,200 square foot, we found it easiest. It was a rectangle, and we timber framed the entire thing. But with a smaller home, or if you have, or a limited budget, you know, we'll choose accents, the living room, you know, the a little bit of exterior entrance. You know, we've done a number of just small entrance porches on existing houses that people are looking to renovate. You know, that's not uncommon. So you can do small things with timber that will really dress up a facade or the interior. You know, there's something about bringing that structure in and seeing the bones of your house that speaks, I think, to, you know, sort of how we feel, you know, innately about, you know, from our days back in caves, if you will. You know, it's just, you can really appreciate that structure, and there's something very comforting about that, even if you have a modest home.
Mm-hmm. There's a question about cost. And we're always a little bit cautious in giving numbers in terms, and we usually have to see the project, and we have to have at least experienced the schematics of the building and where the timber frame applies, whether it's a front porch or rear porch. Most of our frames themselves, if you can think of it as sort of freestanding, start somewhere in the range of maybe $60 or $70 a square foot. But that's a hard number to really analyze early on, because we don't know exactly how it fits, what the engineering is. So if we have something to work with, if we have a plan, a bubble drawing, a schematic of some sort, we can always then begin the images, fine-tune those, and precisely price them as we do in our proposals. We're glad to do that. But keep in mind, folks, that we still have to understand the cost of the whole building.
Yeah, and it is a really challenging and complex question. You know, I think we get so used to going to the store or shopping for a car, and you pick the model, you pick the base model, the mid model, or the high-end model, and then you can customize, and you can look at the screen and you can see the numbers changing right there, and you can have a pretty good feel for what this car costs. And building a custom house just isn't like that. I think you start big, you start with general conversations about what you'd like to spend and what we typically see. But within that, you have to continue to kind of let the conversation evolve, because as Drake alludes to, you're kind of talking in a vacuum if you just have these broad conversations. Every client has a different level of expectation. they see the work that we do on our website maybe, and they have a sense of, what we do, and they have a sense of what they'd like. But even within that, there's a range. Some projects, the finish level is different than other projects, and the systems are different than in another project. So, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. It needs to be had on the front end, but it needs to be had with some context. And we don't, as a company, really love throwing out numbers, because we're trying to do the best we can with the best information we can to give our clients the ability to make good decisions, and we need to know a little bit more. So I'd sort of leave it at that.
There's a great question that just came up about how we involve subcontractors, general contractors, builders in locations where we're not overly active. We act as general contractors in the Portland area and in the Farmington, New York area. But if we're building off-site, how do we manage those relationships with the other partners who build this entire building? And by the way, we're responsible for our own products. Whatever we have sold you, we will install, but we're still coordinating with the local builder. So can you touch on that, Ty?
Sure. Well, I think I understand the question. I think there's maybe a couple of questions in there. So every one of our projects has a little bit different delivery methodology, if you will. So someone might come to us in the Finger Lakes, they're, an hour away or less, and they'll say, hey, we'd like New Energy Works to design and build our home. And so in that case, it opens us up to being able to take them through the entire process of our fully integrated process of design build, so that we're not only designing the house, we're also the general contractor, and we're providing things with our own, through our own means, like the timber frame and the enclosure, wall panels and roof panels, maybe windows, but we're responsible for the whole project. In a number of projects, I have projects all over the place, as does David and the West Coast folks. Many times we're working with a builder in another state, and I can think of a whole bunch right now. And how those relationships start are different every time. Sometimes the client brings the builder to us. Sometimes the client says, hey, can you help us find a builder in our area? And we might say, yeah, we've worked with so-and-so in the past. And sometimes they'll ask us to come along and help them make decisions, help them vet the builder. And they'll say, gee, I've heard of this builder here, or I've talked to a friend who had someone build their house, and they like them, but I'd like to have a conversation with them, and we're happy to do all of that. And so sometimes it's a combination of things. They'll ask us to vet. We'll bring somebody else. We'll say, gosh, we know this person. Why don't you talk to them as well? So in those cases, we're kind of acting as a subcontractor, and all I can say is we do that every single day. And in many ways, the bulk of our work as a timber frame company is operating, and I think they'll talk more about this maybe in one of the later sessions, but we're working as a timber frame specialty subcontractor for a builder in Connecticut or wherever. And so that we do that every day. And I think I don't want to steal away from Eric and other people's, conversation points later on, but they work in that capacity all the time in our engineering group, and are well versed in it. But from the design perspective, we constantly work with outside builders. On the West Coast, we really don't do much general contracting. And so David, you're working with outside builders all the time.
All the time. And we try to kind of bring this around to the design process. If you have a contractor selected during the design process, we will encourage feedback and interaction with that contractor, because we would like the builder to be on board with the systems and the concepts that we're pushing forward as an effort to streamline the process. So we are very used to, especially out here in the West Coast, as Ty said, to working with other builders. And then, it's so spread out. Oftentimes it is the first time, because, California is a huge state, and, you work in Northern California, and then to go down to Southern California, it's definitely a different contractor.
Yeah, David touches on a really good point that I'd just like to maybe expand on real quick, which is we really want to work together with a builder, if it's an outside builder, to understand the systems and materials that are prevalent in their area. We're doing a project in South Carolina right now, and we spent a lot of time talking about the foundation. What is this foundation going to be going to be made of? Is it going to be block? Is it going to be poured concrete? And some builders are more comfortable with certain systems. Some are less comfortable with certain systems. We'll certainly bring, our opinion to the table and say, if we think something's not a good idea, we're happy to say it. But we want to draw from the local builder to get their input and help develop the drawings accordingly.
I think we have one last question, and it is a very good one, and I've heard this before. The participant has said, we've owned our property for more than a decade. We've been to several shows and we've done the classes twice, but we seem to be stuck on getting anything started. We aren't even sure exactly how big our home should be or what our budget should be. How do we begin? I think this is where the add to cart logo. Ty, you want to address that one?
I was gonna jump off that one and let David start, and then I'll let me chime in at the end.
Okay. How do we earn their trust and start the process, David?
Gosh, you touched on the design questionnaire earlier. I think that's a great, starting point. I will assume that these participant has already done that if they've been to several shows, and but the design questionnaire makes you think about how you live and spells out spaces for you, so you can start to actually put some real numbers to quantify what your spatial requirements are going to be. But honestly, you can come to us with just an idea, and we can say, hey, what's an average bedroom size? And we're like, well, it depends on how your various things, but we can say 12 by 12 to 15 by 15, or we'll start putting up some diagrams to create some what I would call programming, where you would put together a system of spaces, and then you say, okay, this is kind of what we think. We're at 2,000 square feet. You're in Washington, and let's say it's $400 a square foot. So we're talking real general numbers. 2,000 square feet, $800,000. For your place in Seattle. Is that, that's a starting point, and that's all that is. It's a beginning, and something and that's why you hire us, or hire a designer, is to walk you through that process, because it's very complicated. And we have years and years of experience doing exactly that.
Did we lose Drake?
I'm coming back on.
Bear with us, everybody.
Ty, do you want to follow up on how somebody would to get started in this process if they're feeling stuck and overwhelmed?
So I think call us, reach out to us, start a conversation. If you're feeling overwhelmed, feeling stuck, there's a reason why. And so oftentimes we come into projects where we're not the first person that people have spoken with or worked with. And they may get stuck. They may hit some roadblocks. And when that happens, I like to understand what are the roadblocks? What are the things that are keeping this project from moving forward? Because design is as much about is problem solving. And if there are roadblocks and obstacles that are preventing the project from moving forward, then we need to solve that problem. And so what I would say is call us. I think we're gonna lead with reaching out to Drake, and then Drake will direct accordingly. But I'd like to know, what the issues are, and let's talk about how we can best help you.
Yeah, agreed. Phone calls are great.
Yeah, that's the best thing. Let's chat a little more.
Can you
Drake, what do you got going on there?
You still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, and we can see your card, if you will, contact slide.
Well, the contact information is here displayed for you. I'm Drake at newenergyworks.com. The phone numbers at the offices are published here. Of course, you can find us on the web, newenergyworks.com. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, send us an email, give us a phone call, a text. We're glad to help with your project and answer all the questions that we didn't get to today. And we would love to be a partner in your project. So I think that sort of wraps up where we are at the moment. Please stay safe, be healthy, be safe, and stay in touch with us, and look forward to the next series of videos and conversations that we'll be having in the future. Thanks again, folks. Be well, stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Drake. Thanks,
Jared,
Ty.
thanks so much. Thanks for
It's good
coming.
seeing everybody.
Good to see you, Drake.
Bye-bye.